May the 15th and the end of an era. Jim Mclean says an emotional farewell to the fans after nearly 22 years in the Dundee United manager's chair. Having taken the Tannadice team to 2 League Cup triumphs and a Premier League championship, he'll undoubtedly be badly missed. So too will his controversial views.
There's no doubt at all that John Prentice is completely responsible for the damage I've done to football, because I never ever thought that I would ever be good enough to be a coach, and it was right out of the blue when he asked me to come back to Dundee, and especially coming back to Dundee because there's no doubt that the worst part of my career was spent at Dens Park, and that I played better for most of the other clubs that I played for than I ever did for Dundee. Going to Dens Park was extremely difficult for me because I went there at the time that Alan Gilzine and people like that were leaving the club and had just left the club, and there's no doubt that their team in the early 60s was an exceptional team. And it's equally difficult for the players at Tannadice at the moment because they're coming in behind the Hegartys and the Sturrocks and Richard Goff and many exceptional players that we've had here, and try to replace them. And at times you don't get the time, but I was never good enough to replace the quality players that had left Dundee at that time. And in hindsight, it probably was a bad move for me. I'm definitely far better in myself than I was before. I always worried about the sack. Nobody knows this, but I think that in football in particular, I must have been the worst player ever never to be freed, because I kept beating the sack. I was transferred to Hamilton Mackies to Clyde before they found me out. I was transferred to Clyde from Clyde to Dundee before they found me out. I was transferred from Dundee to Kilmarnock, and I actually was never once played in Kilmarnock reserve team, and they allowed me to come back and coach but didn't allow me to play, and as a result I've never ever, well, I'm telling everybody anyway, I've been so good a player that I've never ever been freed. And it's equally the same here in the time I've been here, that once you go into management, you most certainly are always at the back of your mind worried about when you'll get the sack, because it doesn't always go well for you. And we're sitting here talking about all the good times, but the directors were magnificent to stick by me, and particularly the year when we fought relegation from the Premier League. And even in the beginning when I came here, I remember some horrendous performances, and again they stuck by me, and hopefully they're satisfied, because most certainly I'm very satisfied with the people I've worked for. If I'd wanted to be a manager that was remembered for winning trophies, then there's no doubt at all your career in football, you must go to Rangers at that time, especially after having won the Premier League with Dundee United and knowing how difficult it was going to be to ever repeat that. But there are a lot more things in life more important than football to me, and most certainly my family and living in Dundee, most certainly it was the right decision to stay here. There have been 13 other offers as well, Alan, that I could have left, and everybody keeps talking about the Rangers one. Every one of the other offers was exciting and bigger clubs than Dundee United. I chose to stay with Dundee United. I've not enjoyed every minute of it, but there's some of the things and some of the times I most certainly have really enjoyed, and obviously there have been extremely difficult times as well. At the end of the day, you obviously hope that whatever you're going to be doing, that you're going to be successful at it. But to be completely honest, I've had some of the confidence that I possibly have at the moment, still not magnificent, but if I'd have had that maybe 10, 15 years ago, I still think we could have done even better. But there's no doubt that what you always aim for is to be successful in whatever you do.
How important was that first trophy important?
That to me was a magnificent day. I think it was a night actually, because I think we'd drawn the first game at Hampden, and it was played midweek. And it was a tremendous achievement, and the best story I've got on that one is that I remember Mr. Robertson, Ernest Robertson, with tears in his eyes saying, "Jim, I never thought I'd live to see this day," and that was a great feeling for me to see the joy that it had given him. I think that once you've achieved anything, it's more difficult the next time round. But to achieve it the next year was tremendous, and to do it again at Dens Park and beat Dundee was not as good as the first one, but most certainly was very pleasing. And at that time we had a tremendous record in the League Cup, because I think the next few years were semi-finals or finals, but unfortunately the finals then were played in Rangers or Celtic's home ground rather than our favourite home ground, which is Dens Park.
Dens Park was again a happy hunting ground for you as far as the league championship was concerned, because you won it there. What do you remember of that season?
Obviously it was a tremendous season. One of the memories was taking the supporters and paying for, I think, the buses or admission down to Greenock, and I think we won that game 4-1 or 4-0, and there was many tremendous performances that season, and equally we were very, very, very lucky in that I think we went through the season with something like about 12 players playing most of the time, not all at the one time by the way, but we had very, very few injuries. We had really good discipline in the club at that time, because obviously we didn't have the problems of suspensions when we were able to get through with 12 players. But I remember that it was around 12, 13 players that on bulk was the maximum we used in the season. To think that you would ever be able to get through a season only using that nowadays is impossible. The quality of player that we had was exceptional, and there's no doubt at all that they grew up together, and that was vital. The wage structure at that time was easy and harmonious. The players were together because of the wage structure, and there was no bickering about he's getting more than me and so on. As they'd all grown up together, then they were basically most of them on the same wages. And it was a tremendous time for the club, and equally the wives got on exceptionally well as well, and I always think that that's vital, because if a player's not happy at home, then most certainly won't be happy with the club environment either. And it was just a tremendous time for the club, and most of them had come through the youth policy, and there had been one or two exceptional players through the buying. It is nice to be sitting here, for instance, at the moment, and I think that the people that are mainly responsible for this are without doubt the directors of Dundee United Football Club. Over the years we've lost players, and everybody said, oh, what a loss. We've also lost magnificent directors in that time as well. People like Johnson Grant, Donkey Hutchison, Ernie Robertson, Jimmy Littlejohn, George Grant. And make no mistake here, we spend far too much time thinking of players and players alone, and they are probably the more important people at the club. But make no mistake, you'll never get a successful club if you've not got it right in the boardroom, and we have always had it right in the boardroom as far as I'm concerned. There's no doubt at all that the youth policy is the biggest plus since I've been with Dundee United. The greatest feeling that I have from my 20 years here is most certainly from the amount of players that we've had through the time I've been manager, and that started way back with Andy Gray, Davy Neary. I think Davy was one of the first signings, and unfortunately he's going to beat me. He's going to be here longer than me. As a player anyway, he'll be here longer than I've been manager. But when you've got signings like Andy Gray and Davy Neary in the beginning, then obviously I've been able to con the people that I was quite good at my job, and that's why I've been able to stay for the 20 years. But there's been many, many terrific players that we've had, and it most certainly has all been built through the youth policy, and all credit must go to the scouts that we've had, because they have brought the players to Tannadice, and I think that the coaching staff and the coaches we've had, such as Walter Smith, Gordon Wallace and people like that, and the coaches we've got at the moment, must take great credit from the players that we have been able to bring through, and eventually sell some of them on. We really gave Andy Gray away, and we definitely were a small club in every way, and people, the English clubs, were coming along watching us all the time, thinking they were going to get, as they got with Andy Gray, which was a gift as far as I'm concerned. But once we got the fee for Raymond Stewart that we did get, people realised that they were going to need to pay for the quality that if we were able to get the quality, then they were going to need to pay big money for it. And I think since then we've proved that anybody that's been sold of real quality, then I think that at least we've had quite a considerable amount of money back in for. The need to sell has been unfortunate, but it's most certainly a factor that has been necessary. The European game against Borussia, for instance, I think that turned round the stature of Dundee United, because up to then, although Jerry Kerr's record in Europe was exceptional as well with the Barcelona results and so on, but there's no doubts at all that up to then we definitely felt, and everybody always thought, that we were an easy touch. And all of a sudden it was tremendous to think the respect that we got from the exploits in Europe. And again, it was a step up the ladder because you want to do well in the domestic scene, but after you've done well in the domestic scene, the next stage is most certainly to do well in Europe. And getting to the European Cup semi-final that year, although I still think we should have done better in Rome, it was a magnificent achievement. What went on in Rome was really nothing short of a disgrace. When we arrived at the park, even went out to inspect the pitch, it was absolutely horrendous, getting pelted with oranges and drinks and so on. And we most certainly need something like that at the end of the game, but before the game we most certainly didn't need it. But it's something that it was an experience, and okay, we can remember the good, but unfortunately there's some bad experiences that we've got to learn from as well, and that most certainly was despicable to think that it would go on the way that it went on. It honestly was very, very frightening. It was even frightening after they'd won the game 3-0. But I don't want to class all the Italian people as the same, but make no mistake yet, there's a lot of European clubs I've great respect for, but the time and the people that were there when we played Rome most certainly left a lot to be desired. And to go to the lengths that they went to try and upset, and most certainly they might think at the end of the day that it was necessary after we'd won the home game 2-0. I doubt that I would ever want to be associated with needing to go to these lengths to try and win a football match. We have great memories from Barcelona. Even Monaco was an exceptional performance. But there's no doubt at all that the one that I would always remember as far as what I like to think of football is the Gothenburg game, and the display of our supporters here the night that we finished up losing the cup final. We drew the game, but we obviously, having lost the first leg 1-0, meant that Gothenburg lifted the cup, and to be completely honest, over the two games they deserved to lift the cup. But it was a tremendous achievement to be there. Most certainly was a magnificent achievement and display by our supporters, and it's one that I will always remember. Well, I think if you look at the record, you'll always find that Rangers and Celtic win most of the cup finals against the smaller teams, and there's definitely a lot of them that we've played either Rangers or Celtic in the finals. But equally, there are games that we most certainly should have won. There are excuses we can make, and that there was one of the games against Rangers, for instance, we were 1-0 up, and Paul Sturrock scored, in my opinion, a magnificent goal. John Holt's running in for the opposite side of the park, and the linesman puts his flag up for offside. Kevin Gallagher, a goal chalked off in the St Mirren game, and then Hamish French against Motherwell. And in every game you can look and see that maybe things didn't run for us. But there's no doubt at all that the biggest disappointment for me that too often we didn't do ourselves justice in the finals at Hampden. And people can say it's a bogey ground. I think that's a load of rubbish. I think at the end of the day, if we're good enough to go to Barcelona and win, we're good enough to go to Monaco and win, and they were an exceptional team, by the way. And we're able to go to wherever. And we most certainly are able to go to Glasgow and win as well. And unfortunately, I get blamed for losing all the cup finals, but make no mistake, I didn't win in Borussia. I most certainly didn't win in Barcelona, and I most certainly didn't win in Monaco. So we've got to be in it together. Hopefully I contributed to the wins, and I most certainly maybe contributed to the losses as well. But equally, too many times we didn't perform to the best. And at the end of the day, we come up with second prize. The same players played exceptionally well in European games, and they most certainly played exceptionally well in most of the semi-finals as well. So there's no reason why that at the end of the day that we didn't win at least one or two of the cup finals at Hampden. And to give an explanation, we're just passing the buck, and I'm criticising the players. They'll probably be criticising me. It's byway. We lost them. It was a magnificent achievement to be in so many cup finals, but at the end of the day, what's for you won't go by you, and unfortunately the Scottish Cup kept going by. Well, the special players for me will always be Paul Sturrock, David Narey, Maurice Malpass, Paul Hegarty, because they are the players that really have stuck with us and stayed with us. There are other players like Andy Gray that we voluntarily transferred. There are other players that we've been forced to transfer, in particular a couple of them that really their behaviour left a lot to be desired as well. But over the piece, the players really have been magnificent, exceptional players that we've been fortunate enough to have here. Most of them have been exceptionally brilliant in the way that they've handled themselves and handled the time they've been with Dundee United. It is extremely difficult to be loyal to Dundee United in comparison to being one of the real top clubs in the country, because once you become exceptional, then most certainly you must have the ambition to want to better yourself, and to better yourself you've most certainly got to play with the best. And as I said earlier, it's extremely difficult to be loyal to the provincial clubs in the game, but the ones that stick out for me, as I said, is most certainly the Hegarty, Narey, Sturrock and people like that who have stuck with us. Because make no mistake, working with me is not always easy, contrary to what people think.
I think a lot of clubs will pick up the talented young players. I think it's the amount of work that Jim puts in with the younger players that has enabled them to bring through so many into the first team. The talent is there in a lot of players at a lot of different clubs, but he's one that makes sure that that talent comes out and gets onto the football pitch and plays at first team level for Dundee United, and he's done that very, very successfully over the period of time that he's been a manager.
Tactically second to none. His coaching ability is different class as well. You know, when we were younger and he had time to take us coaching, it was a great afternoon, believe it or not, to have the manager coaching us. His knowledge of the game's unbelievable.
The man wants perfection. He wants you. He knows what you can play at, you know, a certain standard. When you drop under the standard, he wants to know why. So obviously, all players have had their run-ins with him. But if you really understand the man, that all he's looking for is for you to do your best, then he reaps the benefit of that club-wise. So if you go into every game realising that if you play below standard, he's going to want to know why, then you begin to understand. I don't think I would have reached as far in my career or got as many goals in my career if I hadn't been pushed by him. I'm saying I eventually played in 2 World Cups, played for my country, and played for about 15 years with Dundee United. I don't think, honestly, if I'd went to another club, I would have maybe achieved as much as I did.
People keep telling me he's retiring. He himself said to me that he's retiring. He says you can put your mortgage on it that he's retiring. So I believe him in that respect. But retiring, yes. Handling it, I can't see him doing that, to be quite honest.
He'll actually miss the players. I don't think he'll own up to that, but I think he'll miss the players, the involvement every day he has with them, either shouting at them or coaching them. Although I think his golf will improve a little bit.
Again, to be honest, I was stupid that if somebody did the right thing, right anything or everything completely 100% accurately, then at the end of the day I was on the phone complaining, and there's no doubt at all that people are allowed to do and write what they want, but unfortunately it's very seldom they write exactly accurately what you've said in the context of what's been said, and they build you up and within no time we chop the legs from you. And I'm sure the media would agree that it most certainly is not improving within their jobs, and their jobs have got a lot more difficult than it was before. But I've got to hold my hands up and say that I was extremely stupid in the way that I had to tell people if I wasn't pleased with the way they wrote something. At the end of the day, I'm a wee bit better now, in that I try to ignore most of it, although I would say I'm only a wee bit better. It's always been important to win, but to me now it's the Roma thing, and you win at all costs. I don't think that necessarily the same things that happened in Rome happen here, but we go to any lengths and breadths to destroy the game with the acceptable thought that, well, we'll come out with a draw, so that's fair enough. And to me, it is definitely not nearly attractive enough. Contrary to what people think, it's not also enjoyable enough, and that it's football that's made me this way. I most certainly would have been joking and happy as Larry, working as a joiner, but football's made me the non-smiling person that I am. But definitely I've got a wee bit disillusioned, even with the attitude of some of the people in the game at the moment. People obviously will say that the Ferguson incident was the last straw. That maybe was the straw that broke the camel's back, but honestly, for the last 3 years, I've felt that it was definitely time for me to cut back, and I should have packed up 3-4 years ago. But there's no doubt at all I've nothing to gain in the last few years, and losing a lot, in that when you've won a trophy, then you're expected to win more trophies. And being around semi-final and final of European Cups, then again anything less than that's not good enough. And the last 2 years we didn't even qualify for Europe. But the last 21 years, 5 months, 2 weeks is there for everybody to judge. The only people that matter to me is the 6,000 supporters, the directors of the club, the players that's worked with me during that time. They can judge what's going on. That is ours. I won't be sitting publicly making comments on whether it's been good, bad or indifferent. I'll leave that to the people, whoever they may be, to judge. There are other people that obviously will judge, and there's no doubt at all that, as I said, the only people who, in my opinion, I would worry about their judgment is the supporters of Dundee United, and that is only 6,000, not the 20-odd thousand that wanted tickets for the Roma match. We've had 6,000 supporters roughly that have backed us through the thick and thin. They can sit in judgment of the last 21 years. The directors most certainly must, and equally the players that played for me. And during the months from roughly about end of April until something about July, I have recently played in the last few years an awful lot of golf. Badly I may say, but I've really enjoyed it because it has been my only relaxation away from Tannadice. I'm exactly the same as in football. I'm a bad loser, and I don't think that you can be a bad loser in football and not a bad loser in any other sport. And there's no doubts at all that if you beat me today, you've had your last interview.
And there's another chance to see that programme on Grampian when it's repeated on Friday 9th July in our Go For It series.